I never expected that an ordinary Tuesday would become the day everything changed. There was nothing unusual about that morning. I woke up, made my coffee, fed the cat, and sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone like always. I even remember feeling a little more tired than usual, but I brushed it off. Just another sign of getting older, I thought. I had errands planned for later, bills to pay, and a phone call I'd been dreading with my sister about the care of our aging father. Life felt heavy but manageable. I was used to the pressure. That morning, though, something felt different, off. There was this strange tightness in my chest, not pain exactly, more like a whisper, a warning. I ignored it. Around noon, I was walking out of the grocery store when my vision blurred. The sunlight seemed to melt into the pavement. I remember gripping the handle of my cart, trying to steady myself. The world tilted. Then nothing. Blackness. No sound. No light. No time. Then something extraordinary happened. I became aware, not of my body, but of myself. I wasn't in pain. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even confused. I just was. There was a quiet presence around me, as if I'd entered a place where the air itself understood me. A warm current seemed to carry me gently upward, though there was no wind. I wasn't floating, I was being carried, cradled almost, like a child. Then I saw it, my body. It was lying on the ground, next to the cart, in the middle of the parking lot. People were rushing toward me, toward it. A woman was yelling for someone to call 911. A man was on his knees beside me, checking for a pulse. I felt no connection to the body at all. It looked so small, so fragile, so unfamiliar. I remember thinking, how could something that weak have held my entire life? But I wasn't scared. In fact, I felt the most peace I'd ever known. I became aware of a presence beside me. I didn't see anyone at first, but I felt them like an embrace without arms. It radiated love, pure and unconditional. I don't know how I knew it, but I felt it. They had known me forever. Not just this life, but before. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. The world I had known, with all its noise and heaviness and deadlines, felt like a dream I had just woken up from. And this place, felt like the truth I had always been searching for. Everything was light, but it wasn't blinding. It was warm, intelligent, alive. The light seemed to know me, and it welcomed me back like a parent welcoming a child home. And that's when I heard it, a voice, not loud, not booming, but clear and deep, like it echoed from within me. Are you ready to remember? I didn't speak with words. I didn't need to. Somehow my soul answered, yes. The voice replied with a gentleness that still makes me emotional to this day. Then come. There is something we must show you. And with that, everything around me changed. The moment I accepted the invitation to remember, it was like the last thread tethering me to the physical world dissolved. I felt myself being drawn upward, though not in the way we understand direction. It wasn't like flying or floating through space. It was more like unfolding, expanding, becoming more of myself with every heartbeat I no longer had. The earth, the parking lot, even my body, it all faded like a distant echo. I was moving towards something that wasn't a place, exactly, but a state of being, a realm where thought, emotion, and spirit intertwined in perfect harmony. There were no walls, no sky, no floor, only light. But this light wasn't just illumination. It was alive. It breathed love into me. The further I traveled, the lighter I became, not just in weight, but in spirit. Every burden I'd carried for decades, the grief over my mother's passing, the guilt I wore like a second skin, the worries about money, family, the aching loneliness, all of it dissolved like dust in wind. I didn't let it go. It let me go. That's the difference. In this place, pain has no anchor. And for the first time in my life, I understood what peace really meant. Not the peace we imagine here on earth, the temporary calm before another storm, but a peace so complete, so consuming, that I could finally rest in it. It didn't ask anything of me. It didn't demand I earn it. It was simply there, waiting, as if it had always been mine, but I had forgotten where to look. I became aware of other presences, beings of light. They didn't speak, but I understood them perfectly. Each of them radiated a distinct vibration, like musical notes in a grand symphony. I could feel their joy at seeing me, not in the way strangers might smile politely, but like family seeing a loved one return from a long journey. There was no judgment in them, no list of mistakes or regrets, only knowing and love. One of them moved closer not in distance but in recognition. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. This being had been with me my entire life. Through every heartbreak, every triumph, every time I cried alone in the dark, it was there, always, quiet, patient, loving. It didn't look like a person, it didn't need to. Its presence was more real than any face I'd ever known. And when I focused on it, I felt everything it felt for me. Pride, understanding, compassion. It saw all of me, not just what I had done in life, but why I had done it. The fears behind the choices, the wounds behind the anger, the longing behind the silence. And it loved me just the same. We communicated without words, thoughts flowing like water between us. "You are safe now," it said, or perhaps thought. "You were never alone." Those words, they undid something in me. A knot I didn't even know I had been carrying deep in my soul. For the first time in my entire existence, I wasn't bracing myself for the next blow. I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood, unloved, forgotten. I was seen, and I was held, not by arms, but by an eternal truth. That's when I realized something else. I was beginning to remember who I truly was. Not the version of me shaped by pain and survival, but the soul beneath all of that, the eternal part. And with each moment, more came back to me, like pieces of a puzzle returning home. I remembered the feeling of being loved before this life, the warmth of belonging to something far greater than myself. And I realized that what I had just left behind, the life I had believed was everything, was only a small chapter in a much bigger story. Just then, the light around me shimmered. The air, if I can call it that, shifted with anticipation. The being beside me gently said, "It's time. They want to show you something." I asked, not with fear, but with reverence. "Who?" "Those who have always known," it replied. "They will show you what is to come." They came not with fanfare or flashing lights, but with a silence so profound it echoed in my soul. One by one they emerged from the light, not stepping forward, but simply becoming visible, as if they had been there all along, just beyond a veil I hadn't known existed. I felt no fear, no confusion, only familiarity. Like seeing old friends you haven't met in this lifetime, but whose presence stirs something ancient inside you. There were 3 of them at first. Their forms were made of light, not blinding, but soft and golden, with a shimmer that danced like sunlight on water. They didn't have faces in the way we think of faces, yet I could sense their expressions, their emotions, and most of all, their joy at seeing me. They knew me, not just my name or the details of my life. They knew me, the real me, the soul beneath all the masks I'd worn in my human life, and what I felt coming from them was love. Not admiration, not approval, not pride in achievements, just pure, unconditional love. One stepped forward, though again, not in space, but in attention, as if it were placing its full focus on me, wrapping me in something I can only describe as remembrance. I suddenly recalled moments long buried in my heart, sitting under a tree as a child, asking the stars if someone out there loved me, crying into my pillow at 17, praying for a sign I wasn't alone, standing in a hospital corridor after my mother passed, feeling like the world had ended. They had been there for all of it. I felt it, every whisper of comfort that came out of nowhere, every unexpected calm during the worst storms of my life. It had been them, these beings, these family. They didn't introduce themselves with names. They didn't need to. They were part of me, part of the soul family I had forgotten, hidden beneath the noise of the physical world. Being with them was like remembering a song you once knew by heart. It unlocked something deeper than memory. It touched the essence of who I was. They encircled me, their presence radiating harmony and safety. I wasn't being judged, I wasn't being evaluated, I was simply being welcomed. And then I felt a shift. More beings began to appear, not just 3 now, but dozens, maybe more. They surrounded me, creating a kind of circle made of light and intention. It wasn't intimidating, it felt sacred. The air, if you could call it that, thickened with something holy. Time no longer existed. My thoughts slowed into deep awareness. My senses expanded beyond anything I'd known. I could feel not just their thoughts, but the space between them, an unspoken connection that united every soul present. And then, in perfect unison, they spoke, not in words, but in pure meaning. Their message poured into me like warm water into an empty vessel. You came from love, you are love, and you are returning to love. The truth of that sentence vibrated through every fiber of my being. It wasn't a philosophy or a comforting platitude. It was reality, the deepest truth I had ever known. They showed me parts of my life, moments I had dismissed as small or meaningless. Holding my niece's hand during a thunderstorm, forgiving someone who never said sorry, smiling at a stranger who looked like they had been crying. These, they said, were the treasures, the sacred acts, the true reasons I had come to earth. I wept, not from sadness, but from a sense of being seen, fully, completely. Nothing was wasted, no act of love forgotten. Every kind word, every moment of empathy, every tear shed with someone else's pain, it all mattered, more than I ever knew. And then, just as gently, the tone shifted. Their energy grew still, reverent. I felt a deep calm wash over the circle, like the collective holding of breath. One of the beings stepped forward, not as a leader, but as a messenger. Without sound, it said, "There is something you must see, something that will return with you." I didn't ask what. I trusted. Whatever it was, I knew it mattered, not just for me, but for all of us still living in the world I had left behind. And so I said, silently but willingly, "I'm ready." As soon as I whispered my readiness, the atmosphere shifted again, not with noise or movement, but with presence. It was as if the very fabric of this otherworldly place bent slightly, like a curtain being drawn back to reveal a sacred inner chamber. The beings of light surrounded me with warmth, and without walking, without traveling, we arrived somewhere else. I don't know how to describe this place fully. Words like room or hall feel inadequate. It wasn't made of walls or ceilings, and yet it felt enclosed, protected, almost sacred. There was no architecture, but it had structure. It stretched in every direction and yet felt intimately close, like being in the center of a vast heart. The light here was different, deeper, more golden. It pulsed softly as though breathing. I could feel the intelligence of the space, not cold or robotic, but ancient and wise. The energy here was so pure that even my thoughts slowed. There was no need to ask questions. Everything was being revealed, not in words or images, but in understanding. They called it the Hall of Knowing. It was not a library in the human sense, but it held all knowledge, not just of history or science, but of meaning. Every soul, every choice, every ripple of consequence, it was all here, vibrating like strings in a cosmic symphony. I was shown my own life, but not like a movie or a slideshow. It was immersive. I refelt moments, not from my perspective alone, but from those I had impacted. A moment of cruelty I had long forgotten was now seen through the eyes of the one I hurt. I felt their pain, but not as punishment. It was simply truth, balanced, honest. Then I was shown a moment of love. I'd once stayed on the phone for hours with a friend who was thinking of ending her life. I didn't think much of it afterward, but here I saw what that night truly meant. I felt her relief, her flicker of hope. her decision to keep going, and I wept. Not from shame this time, but from awe. Everything mattered. Every single act, kind or unkind, was a thread in a grand tapestry I had never seen before. Here, I saw it all, and I understood. We are never isolated. We are woven together in ways we can't comprehend while walking the earth, but it didn't stop with just my life. The beings guided me toward a deeper understanding. It was as if they peeled back the layers of illusion and let me peer behind the curtain of time itself. I saw not just the past, but the shape of time, how it rippled, looped, and stretched like a living organism. I realized that time, as we know it on Earth, is only a narrow slice of reality. Here, in the Hall of Knowing, it was more like a spiral. All things happening, influencing each other, constantly unfolding yet already complete. I saw humanity, not as a series of wars and inventions, but as a collective soul on a difficult journey. I saw how we had forgotten our origin, how pain had shaped our systems, how fear had built our walls. But I also saw something else, something powerful. I saw our potential, flashes of children born with open hearts, people waking up to love instead of control, a deep longing rising in millions of souls, all at once, aching for something real, something sacred. I saw the earth responding too, the forests, the oceans, the animals, calling us home with a language we once knew. I understood then, the world wasn't ending because we were hated or punished. No, it was shifting, because love refuses to let us stay asleep. The beings told me, without judgment, what you are about to see is not prophecy. It is a possibility, one born from the choices made and the love yet to be chosen. I wanted to ask what they meant, but I didn't need to. My soul already knew. What I was about to be shown wasn't just for me. It was a message, a gift, a warning, a hope, and I was chosen to carry it back. What happened next is difficult to put into human language. It wasn't just a vision, I lived it. I was pulled into a stream of awareness that transcended time and space, and I became both observer and participant in something vast, unsettling, and deeply sacred. The beings of light stood beside me, not to shield me, but to anchor me in love. Because what I was about to witness wasn't easy. It began with a feeling, a tightening in the energy around me, like the earth herself holding her breath. Then I saw it. Cities trembling with unrest. People shouting not in unity, but in desperation. Streets filled with smoke, not always from war, but from wildfires, floods, and storms that had broken free from the natural order. The earth was changing, but not because she was angry, because she was responding, trying to shake us awake. I saw economies collapsing, but not instantly. It was more like a slow unraveling, thread by thread, as greed and fear could no longer hold together a system built on division. Families suffered, not just from lack, but from confusion. Many had forgotten how to connect without screens, without speed, without noise. But amid the chaos, I saw something else, something brighter. Small communities formed, people helping one another, growing food together, sitting around fires and praying, not out of fear, but out of remembrance of something old, something eternal. Then I saw a deeper layer of the vision, the spiritual one. There was a great unveiling happening. Masks were falling, not physical masks, but the ones we wear in life to protect our ego, our image, our comfort. I saw people waking up, some suddenly, as if struck by lightning, others slowly, like a flower turning toward the sun. A light began to emerge across the planet, not one source, but many. Points of awareness, individuals who remembered who they were, souls who refused to respond with more fear and instead chose compassion. Even in the face of loss, they radiated peace. I saw them standing in hospitals, in destroyed homes, in war zones, and they glowed because they carried something most had forgotten. Love is stronger than death. And then I was taken even deeper, shown the edge of what could be. There was a moment, a kind of spiritual threshold. I don't know when, I wasn't given a date, but I was shown that humanity would come to a crossroads. A point where the collective heart of the world would face a choice, to return to love or to descend into forgetting once more. And in that moment, I felt the weight of every soul matter. Every person's awakening, every act of kindness, every prayer whispered into the dark. It counted. It added weight to one side of the scale. And the being showed me with reverence that we are closer to that tipping point than we realize. I asked without words, will the world end? And the answer came gently, not in the way you fear, but in the way it was always meant to. I understood. The end was not destruction, but transformation. The world as we know it, rooted in fear, in illusion, in separation, is dying, but not to punish us, to birth something new, something ancient, yet forgotten. A return to unity, to truth, to God, not as a man in the sky, but as the breath in every living thing. The vision ended, not with fire or war, but with light. I saw people holding hands across cultures, religions, and generations. I saw healing, not just of the planet, but of our hearts. I saw the divine not coming from the clouds, but awakening within us. And just before the vision faded, the beings gave me a final message. Tell them, the end is not to be feared. It is to be welcomed, for it is the beginning of remembering who they are. When I returned to the hall, I was changed. I had seen the possibility of what's to come, and I knew I had to share it, not to scare, but to prepare, because love always prepares the way. After the vision faded, I was left in stillness, utter, sacred stillness. The hall of knowing pulsed softly around me, not with urgency, but with presence. The beings stood close, watching me with the patience of eternity. They knew I needed time to absorb what I had seen, and I wept, not because of fear, not because of the images of collapse or fire or sorrow. I wept because of the beauty in the truth. I had spent my entire life believing in a punishing world, that if things went wrong, it was because we were broken, that suffering was a sign of failure, abandonment, or wrath from a distant, disappointed God. But here in the presence of these luminous beings, I finally understood. We were never being punished. What I had witnessed wasn't divine anger. It was divine mercy in its purest, most heartbreaking form. The changes coming to our world, the unraveling, the disruptions, the endings, were not designed to hurt us. They were allowed to wake us, to pierce through the illusions we had built around ourselves like armor, illusions of control, illusions of separation, illusions of time and fear and scarcity. These things weren't real, not in the eternal sense, and the longer we clung to them, the more pain we created. Not because God demanded it, but because we had forgotten how to live from love. I was shown how humanity had slowly drifted from the core truth of who we are, not in one great fall, but in tiny ways, generation by generation, choosing fear over trust, power over compassion, image over essence, until eventually we could barely hear the voice of our own souls over the noise of survival. But the divine never gave up on us, never withdrew love, never turned away. And now, with the veil thinning between the worlds, that love was pressing into our reality in a way it hadn't for ages. That pressure we feel, deep in our hearts, in our sleep, in our longing for something more. It's not the beginning of destruction. It's the beginning of remembrance. I was shown how pain becomes sacred when it's allowed to lead us back home. The breakdowns we experience, individually and collectively, aren't signs that we've failed. They're signs that the soul is breaking through the shell, and like any birth, it feels messy, chaotic, sometimes even unbearable. But it's necessary. The world as we know it is dissolving, not because we are doomed, but because we are done with pretending, done with building lives around lies that don't nourish the soul, done with systems that reward separation and punish vulnerability. And so, what looks like the end is really the beginning. The beings spoke again, not aloud but directly to my spirit. They must remember, that is why you were shown this, not to create fear, but to awaken memory. Memory of what? Of who we truly are, of the light that lives in each of us, of the home we come from and will return to, of the sacred thread that connects every soul to every other, no matter the body, the race, the religion, or the wound. I was also shown that this remembrance doesn't require perfection. It doesn't ask us to renounce our lives or become saints overnight. It begins in small moments, quiet choices, a breath taken before reacting, a kind word offered instead of silence, a forgiveness given not because it was earned, but because you are free. This is the call, not a demand, not a test, a call from the deepest heart of God to the aching hearts of humanity. And when we answer, when even a few of us choose love instead of fear, we shift everything, we tilt the future. We become the very hands of grace in a world that has forgotten its own worth. As I stood there in the hall, surrounded by those radiant souls, I felt the message settle inside me like a seed. Not to preach, not to warn, but to remind. We're not broken. We're waking up, and we are being called home, not to a place but to a way of being that feels like heaven even while we walk the earth. After all the visions, after the unraveling and the revelations, I asked, is there still time? The beings did not hesitate. Their answer was immediate and clear, but filled with compassion. Yes, but it begins in the heart of each soul. They didn't speak of grand revolutions, of governments toppling or sudden miracles. Instead, they showed me three simple but sacred things, three actions that any person, anywhere, can choose. And they told me these choices, multiplied across hearts, could tilt the entire course of humanity's future. It wasn't about preventing every hardship. Some shifts must come, some illusions must fall. But the worst outcomes, those born of despair, division, and disconnection, can still be softened, transformed, even avoided, not through force, but through remembrance. And here is what they showed me. 1. Return to inner stillness. This was the first and perhaps most important. The beings showed me that most people live in constant noise, external and internal, rushing from task to task, worry to worry, never pausing long enough to hear the whisper of their own soul. And in that disconnection, fear grows. Reactivity becomes the norm. We forget who we are because we forget how to be still. But stillness is where remembrance begins. They showed me people simply sitting in silence. No rituals, no chanting, just presence. A woman watching the sunrise in grief and feeling her child's presence. A man taking deep breaths in a hospital corridor, finding peace amidst pain. A child lying on the grass, looking up at the sky and feeling held by something greater. It's in those quiet moments that the soul begins to stir. That divine guidance can be heard. That healing flows like water into cracks long ignored. The being said, tell them, if they return to stillness, they will remember the voice of love. 2. Choose love over reaction. Even once, the second action was deceptively simple. Choose love, even once in a moment, when fear would be easier. They showed me how one act, just one, can change the entire path of a life. A man ready to lash out in anger at his son pauses. He breathes, he softens, he hugs him instead. That moment becomes a ripple of healing through generations. A woman, betrayed by a friend, chooses not to seek revenge, but to grieve, forgive, and release. That inner shift becomes a beacon for her children, who learn a different way to hold pain. It doesn't have to be grand, just real, just true. The beings said, they are not expected to be perfect, only to choose love when it would be easier not to. And that one choice, when multiplied across millions, alters the future. 3. See the divine in one other soul. The final message was the most tender. They showed me a homeless man sitting alone on a cold bench. People passed him by, indifferent. But one woman stopped. She knelt beside him, looked into his eyes and said, "I see you." She gave him a sandwich, yes, but more importantly, she gave him her attention, her respect, her love. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in him, but in her. They both remembered something sacred. The beings explained, if each person could truly see the divine in just one other soul every day, the world would not fall. It would rise. It's not about converting others, fixing them, or saving the world overnight. It's about witnessing the light in someone else, especially when that light is hidden by pain. I stood in awe as these truths settled into me. They weren't complicated. They didn't require status, money, education, or religion, just willingness, just heart. Return to stillness. Choose love, even once. See the divine in someone else. These are the lifelines thrown to us from the other side, not as rules, but as reminders of what we already know deep within. We don't need to wait for the world to change. We are the change. And it begins right now, in the next breath, the next word, the next quiet choice. Just when I thought I had seen everything I came to see, felt everything I came to feel, the light around me changed. It didn't grow brighter or dimmer. It deepened, as if I was being drawn even closer to the heart of this sacred place. The beings of light stepped back, not in rejection, but in reverence. Their presence remained, but they faded gently into the background. Something or someone was coming, and then I felt it before I saw it. A frequency, a memory, a presence so familiar that my soul ached the instant it touched mine. It wasn't logic. It wasn't cognition, it was recognition, as natural as breathing, as undeniable as love. I turned, or rather my awareness shifted, and there they were, my brother. He had died 23 years earlier. I hadn't seen his face since we buried him. He had been only 18. A motorcycle accident took him in the blink of an eye, and I had carried that wound with me every day since. But here he was, not as I remembered him, in pain, lifeless, broken, but whole, radiant, ageless, and yet unmistakably him. His eyes still held that mischievous spark. His energy still hummed with humor and warmth. But now there was something more, a serenity I had never seen in him before, a lightness. I couldn't speak, not in the human way, but I didn't need to. He smiled, and somehow I felt every word he had ever wanted to say to me. "You made it," his soul whispered. I wept again, this time with joy so deep it tore through every layer of sorrow I had ever buried. I ran to him, or maybe we moved into each other, and I was held, not by arms, but by presence. By love that remembered everything, the fights, the laughter, the childhood secrets, the regrets, none of it forgotten, none of it held against me. It was all seen, all forgiven, all held in a light that made even the pain feel beautiful. And I felt his hand, not physically but spiritually, place something into mine. A memory, a moment I had forgotten. I was 6 years old, crying in my bed, afraid of the dark. He was only 9, but he came into my room, lay beside me and told me, "Don't worry, I'll always be here." I hadn't remembered that in years, but now it washed over me like warm rain, and I realized he had kept that promise, even after death, even through all the times I had whispered his name into the silence. He had been there. He said or thought, or maybe it was just known, "I never left and I never will." We sat, again, not with bodies, but with souls, in a field of light that felt like the backyard of our childhood. And we talked. Not about events or timelines, but about being. He told me about the peace he had found, about how the moment he crossed over, all fear dissolved, about how he had been guided, just like me, by beings of love, and how he had been waiting for this moment, for me to come home, even if only for a little while. I asked him, with my heart, why do some of us stay behind? Why do some go and others remain in pain? His answer wasn't doctrine, it was compassion, because each soul has a path. Some stay to learn, others to teach, some to awaken others by leaving. It's not about punishment, it's about purpose. And then he added something that made everything make sense. There's no real goodbye, just for now. The love doesn't end, it grows. And one day, we all remember. That reunion healed something I didn't even know was still broken. It didn't erase the loss, it fulfilled it. Like a story that had finally found its missing chapter. I asked if I could stay, just a little longer. He smiled, and I knew the answer, not yet. But before we parted, he gave me a final message. Tell them I'm okay. Tell them we all are. And tell them the love they feel for us. It's not one-sided. We feel it too. Every single time. Then, with a peace that felt like music, he faded into the light. But he didn't leave. He just stepped into the part of eternity that still holds him. And I carried his presence with me, like a fire in the cold, like a hand in the dark, like a promise that nothing is ever truly lost. After my reunion with my brother, I felt full, more whole than I'd ever felt in my earthly life. There was no pain here, no weight, no fear of being misunderstood. Every part of me had been seen, held, and loved. It felt like the final destination, like home. And yet, I sensed something shifting. The light around me, once warm and steady, now moved gently, like a tide preparing to change. The beings of light returned, their presence as peaceful as ever. My brother stood behind them, his energy still with me, but no longer at the center. It was time. I didn't need to be told. I knew I was being given a choice, not forced, not manipulated, just offered. The beings didn't pressure. There was no guilt, no mission I was required to complete. They simply invited me into a truth I already felt in my soul. They said, without words, you may stay, you have earned your rest, or you may return. With all that you've seen, all that you've remembered, the choice is yours. And I paused. The pull to stay was strong. It wasn't about escaping pain, it was about finally belonging. Here there was no loneliness, no aging, no bills, no regret. Every soul I had ever loved, would ever love, was here, or would be. But then I thought of Earth, of my children, of my spouse, of the way sunlight falls through the kitchen window on quiet mornings. I thought of laughter and music and the smell of rain on warm pavement. I thought of the people who were still searching, still hurting, still asking the questions I now had answers to. I thought of the hands that had held mine in hospitals, the strangers who had smiled at me in moments when I needed it most, the words that had saved me, the prayers I had whispered when I thought no one was listening, and I remembered they were never wasted. Every act of love, no matter how small, ripples into eternity. I realized then that Earth, for all its pain, is not a punishment either. It's a sacred place, a school of the soul. And suddenly, my heart was filled with a longing I hadn't expected. Not just to leave the pain behind, but to return and bring light into it. To share what I now knew. To remind even one person that they are not alone. To be a flicker of remembrance in a world that often forgets. The beings around me felt my decision before I could speak it. They came closer, wrapping me in something I can only describe as approval without condition. Their love didn't grow stronger because I chose to return. It had never changed. But they honored my choice, and I felt them bless it with a kind of spiritual embrace. My brother stepped forward once more, and in his eyes I saw both sadness and pride. "I'll be there," he whispered. "Even when you can't feel me, I'll remind you when it gets hard. I'll whisper when you forget." I asked, with my soul, "Will I remember all of this when I return?" The answer came with gentleness. "Not fully, but the truth will live in your heart, and when you need it most, it will rise to meet you." Then the light began to shift again, not fading, but folding inward like a page turning. And the final thing I felt, before the transition began, was this message: go with love, go with peace, and tell them the veil is thinner than they think. Then everything slowed. The warmth, the soundless music, the deep knowing, it all began to retreat, like the shore pulling back before a wave. And then, darkness, weight, cold. The first breath back in my body was like fire and wind and stone, all at once. Pain rushed in, but beneath the pain was purpose. I had chosen to return, and I knew now it was for a reason. Coming back into my body was like being pressed through the eye of a needle, tight, heavy and loud. The peace I had known just moments before vanished beneath a flood of sensations. Pain in my chest, the blinding lights of the emergency room, voices shouting my name, machines beeping frantically. I was surrounded by life, yet all I could think was, why does this feel so far from living? For the first few hours I couldn't speak. Not because of the tubes or the trauma, but because my soul was still adjusting. My spirit, so recently cradled in eternal love, now felt crammed into a fragile vessel. But even in the discomfort I remembered, not everything, but enough. Enough to know that the love I experienced was real, enough to know that death is not an end, but a homecoming, and enough to know that I had come back with a purpose. The weeks that followed were hard. The body heals slower than the spirit. But during the long nights in that hospital bed, as I stared at the ceiling and listened to the hum of machines, I felt something stirring in me, a knowing, a quiet fire that said, you carry something now, and it's time. People around me started to notice the change. My family said I seemed lighter even while in recovery. Nurses told me there was a strange peace in my room they couldn't explain. And when I finally began to speak, really speak, about what had happened, something incredible began to unfold. People listened, and not just with their ears, with their souls. Friends who had lost children came to me in tears, asking if I had seen them. A man I'd known for years, an atheist, held my hand and said, I don't know what you believe now, but something in your eyes tells me it's true. But I didn't start preaching. I didn't hand out answers. I simply began to live differently. I looked people in the eye, really looked. I listened more than I spoke. I stopped waiting for a sign and started being one. And slowly, I began to understand my true mission, not to convince, but to remind. To remind the grieving mother that her child is not gone. They are more alive than ever. To remind the man on the brink of despair that there is more than this moment of pain. To remind the lonely heart that their love still reaches beyond the veil, and that the love they feel in return is real. I still have bad days. I still get tired, frustrated, and overwhelmed. Life doesn't become perfect after dying. It just becomes clearer. The pain still comes, but now I meet it with open hands, not closed fists, because now I know something most people only hope for. We are loved, eternally, unconditionally, not for what we accomplish, but for who we are at the core. Souls learning to remember again and again. And the message I was sent back to carry is simple. You are not alone. That ache you feel when you miss someone, it's not emptiness. It's connection. It's the stretch of your soul reaching across dimensions, reminding you that love doesn't die. That longing for something more in life, it's not a problem. It's a compass. Follow it. It will lead you home. And that fear of death that haunts so many, it can be replaced, not with denial, but with truth. Because death is not the end. It is the continuation of love in its purest form. So if you're watching this and you've lost someone, if you're afraid, if you wonder whether this life means anything, let me offer you this. It does. You do. They do. And one day when the time is right, not before, you'll remember everything. You'll see them again. And you'll understand that nothing was ever lost, only transformed. Until then, stay soft, stay open, and look for the light. Because I promise it's always looking for you too. If this message touched your heart, you are not alone. Share your story in the comments and let's hold each other through the remembering. Subscribe for more stories of love beyond death, and never forget, the love never ends. Discover how to unlock your prophetic destiny, activate spiritual gifts, and impact your sphere of influence with the power of the kingdom. Don't miss this transformative opportunity. Click the link in the video description to learn more.